our DAO proposal mechanism, where if we change our app ID, it'll either be invalid or it'll tell us what our proposal is. And now what we want to do is we want to render our register and our vote buttons. So to do that, we're going to use our register and vote components generated by our TEALScript repo. So if we come to our TEALScript directory and then go to artifacts, components, and I'm going to click on DaoRegister and DaoVote.tsx. I'm going to copy and come back to our front end under source, components. I'm going to go ahead and paste. So now we have DAO create application, but we also have register and vote here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to my app.tsx, and I'm going to first start with my UI as usual, and I'm going to copy this same logic that we did for create application, except I'm going to change it to when the app ID is not 0, because we only want our register and our vote functions to show when the app ID is not 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my components. I'm going to get the register example and paste it in here. And then I'm going to copy in this and do the exact same thing for my vote example. So copy the example. And here we go. So first thing I need to do to get this working is import DAO vote and import DAO register. And once we have those two imported, we'll still have some errors down here. We'll see that our registered ASA isn't set and our in favor isn't set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some state for our registered ASA. And much like in the contract, registered ASA is going to be the asset ID. Where's my use state? Register ASA is going to be my asset ID for the DAO token, right? So this is the token, this is the ID of the token that a person must hold in order to vote. So I'm going to set its default value to 0. And then for vote, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually first, let me show you, I change this to true. And then I go to a known app. We now have call register and call vote. I'm going to change this register to vote. And then I'm going to modify what I render here. So underneath, or so surrounding my DAO vote component, I'm going to put it in a div. And then I'm going to copy and paste the same component and just set it to false. And so now, actually, let me swap this what I want this to be false and this to be true. Other than if I do vote against, vote in favor. So now on the left is vote against, on the right is vote in favor. And I know that because our first DAO vote component has in favor false, and our second DAO vote component has in favor true. Okay, now if I go ahead and try to run this, it's going to fail. And it's going to tell me, where is it? Unavailable asset. So the first thing we need to do is get the proper value for our registered ASA. So right now in our use state, we just have it hard coded to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and write some logic for updating that. In particular, what I want to do is I'm going to come down to my get proposal function, and I'm going to rename it to get state. And then I'm also going to use this as an opportunity, to set registered ASA. It's going to be state registered ASA ID as number. Now this time around, we are going to allow registered ASA ID, or say registered ASA ID might be undefined, and it would be undefined in the case that this is a valid DAO, but it hasn't yet been bootstrapped, in which event, if this is undefined, then we're just going to set our registered ASA ID to 0. And we'll handle that later in our code and how we render the components. But for now, we know if there's a registered ASA ID, so if there's a bootstrapped DAO, then we'll get the number of the ID. And because this is in our get state, this is going to run every time our app ID changes. So now if I come here and I update this and I call register to vote, what's going to happen now is we're going to run into an assert failure. And if we take a look back at our contract, so without even tracking down the exact line, if we come to our contract and take a look at our register method, the assert that's failing here is checking if the user holds the token. So what we need to do is modify our DaoRegister call to do an opt-in first. Now the nice thing is that we've already written our test. So if we come to TEALScript test DAO test and we go to our register function, you'll see that we already have this defined. So I'm just going to copy this code and I'm going to paste it in here. Now there's a couple imports we're missing, so I'm going to import algo SDK, and then I'm going to import algo kit. And so if I come back down here, I change this to props. This will already be a number in this case. Oh, just kidding. No, it won't be. And so what we're going to do is we can see the one thing that's still undefined is our algo D. So I'm going to go ahead, come up to our props and define a new property called algo D client. And this is going to be an algo SDK algo D v2. And so now I'm going to pass in props algo D client. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. And if we take a look at our test, we note that we sent the send params with a fee of micro algo 3000. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. Again, this is the benefit of writing our test before we write our front end. We already know exactly how we need to call our register function, so we don't need to debug it in our front end. We've already done the debugging in our tests when we initially wrote them. So we know we need to do the opt-in and we need to send the transaction with a fee of 3000 micro algo. And now to get this working, we're just going to come back down to our DaoRegister function and define algo client is equal to algo client. And so now if I call register again, I'll see we did one transaction for the opt-in, one for the application. Actually, let me take a look at this. So I'm going to do algo kit localnet explore, and let's take a look at this transaction. We can see that this is an app call and it has 2 inner transactions. And if we scroll down, when we call our register, remember it transfers the asset and then freezes the asset. So we have 2 inner transactions. The first one was a transfer, so it transferred the token 1163 to our caller account. So this AXR account, if we come back to here and we look at our wallet connection, AXR is the account we're connected to. So it transferred the token to that account and then it froze. So this SD2 is our contract account, and then the contract froze it. So it sent 2 inner transactions, thus why we needed to set the fee. Oh, I thought it showed the fee somewhere. Oh, here it is. Why we need to set the fee to 3000 micro algo. Okay, so our register function is working. Now let's get our vote functionality working. So if we actually go ahead and vote, it'll work just fine. So let me head back to that flow. We take a look at this app again. We can now see that our votes have showed up. But what we want to do is we want to update our UI. So we basically want to have the votes show here so the user knows that they actually did something. So I'm going to come up underneath where we have a proposal. I'm going to copy and paste this header again. I'm going to rename it to votes. And then I'm simply going to have a paragraph where I display votes total divided by votes in favor. Or I should say over votes in favor. Now these we haven't defined yet. So let's go ahead and we're going to say const votes total, set votes total. That's going to be use state number 0, and then const, actually let me just copy this, votes in favor, set votes in favor. Okay. So we're going to have two different states, votes total and votes in favor. So we see votes 0, 0, and we need to update that. And we're going to do that in our getState function. So I'm going to simply call set votes in favor 0, or excuse me, state dot votes in favor dot as number. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing here. Set votes total to state dot votes total as number or 0. Okay, so the only other thing, so if we go ahead, let me actually show you this working now. So we'll see when we come to DAO 1160, it'll show, oh, I think, oh yes, I want to show votes in favor over votes total. Makes a little bit more sense. So we have 2 votes total, one of them are in favor. If I would go ahead and vote against, we actually won't see it updated. So this brings us to a good point. So when I click vote against, I'm going to click it a second time, we should be seeing 1 out of 4, but it's still saying 1 out of 2. And now if I change this app ID, it'll update to 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4. Now we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? This is happening because the only time we update our votes is in this getState function. And right now, we are not tying it to our vote functions at all. So what I'm going to do is I want to pass in this setState function to our votes component. That way we can call it after we vote. So I add the props here. I come into the props here in DAO vote, and I say set state, and this is going to be a void method. And then after we call the method, I'm going to simply do await props dot set state. So after we click register, it will I forgot I need to make this async. Oh no, that's not how you define it. You define it like this. Sorry, I forgot how TypeScript worked for a second there. Okay. So now we do await props dot set state. Oh. This should be called getState. My bad. getState. And we're going to come up here to our vote, get state. And we're going to await prompt, so get state. Okay. So now, if we come to 1160 again, and I'm going to vote in favor, we'll now see both our votes updated, and we'll vote against to show this working. And we'll see the votes total update again, vote in favor. And then if we leave, actually, this is something we still need to implement. So if we leave, what's going to happen is it's still going to show the votes from the last app ID, right? It's not going to reset itself. So we need to do that ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a function called reset state. And this is going to be a very simple function. I just set registered ASA to 0, set votes in favor to 0, and set votes in total to 0. So set all of our state to 0. And here I'm going to reset state. And then down here, I'm going to reset state. Okay, so now if I come to 1160, we'll see 3 out of 7. If I come to 0, we'll see 0 out of 0, right? So that's the exact functionality that we expect. Okay, so now at this point, we are able to create our DAO. And then we'll see our register function, or our register button, and our vote button. However, you notice if we try to vote before we register, it's going to throw an error. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how we fix this. And the key is that we want to check if the user is holding the asset. And depending on if they're holding the asset or not, we're going to render either the register or the vote in favor. So I'll see you then.